Hello and welcome to another HanDrinksSolo wine info video, and today we're discussing relative newcomers McFarlane wines and their Monday's Child Chenin Blanc 2020. Now, McFarlane may be a relatively new outfit, but winemaker Alex McFarlane has already worked with a number of heavy hitters in her short 10-year career. She started out on the red winemaking team at Spier estate before moving on to a more viticultural role at DeToren, and from DeToren she moved on to a small outfit in Paarl called Druk My Niet. Now, at Druk My Niet, she really got a sense of what it means to be in control because she got to do winemaking, she got to do viticulture, and by the sounds of things, also labeling, bottling, sales, marketing, and distribution. So it was really this experience that then gave her the courage, along with her husband, to step out and launch McFarlane Wines, their very own project. And for those of you who've been wondering, Druk My Niet, where have I heard that before? Well, that was the little Paarl outfit that produced an award-winning Malbec in the Malbec Challenge, and also was one that we featured in January of 2022. An absolutely incredible, slightly older 2015 vintage, which is definitely worth hunting down. But back to the Monday's Child Chenin Blanc. Perhaps something to note up front is that even though this is only the second vintage that this wine has been produced, Alex has already managed to achieve a 4.5-star Platter rating, which is really quite tricky when you're still getting to know the vineyards. What of the vineyards, you might ask? Well, the fruit is sourced from the Poker Dry Hills, up at about 300 meters above sea level. And really, as I've mentioned before, Poker Dry Hills is about as close to hallowed ground as you can get in Stellenbosch. And mostly for the reason that it has altitude, as I've mentioned. It's got decomposed granite soils, which everyone gets very excited about for its ability to deliver lovely freshness and acidity in a wine. And then it also has fairly stark exposure to those cooling ocean currents, which we've mentioned plenty of times are very important in a region like Stellenbosch. So the Poker Dry Hills really has a lot going for it. Now, Alex McFarlane obviously keeps that in mind when she comes to making the wine, because outside of the super primo site, which you can go into detail for ages, her winemaking is something that she likes to keep rather simple. There were only 1,200 bottles made of the 2020 vintage, which was the result of being pressed off skins into large 500-litre barrels where it was both fermented and matured. And I guess it's the simplicity of this winemaking that makes the end result so much more impressive. But what is in the glass? Well, we talk about shy noses and extroverted noses. This is definitely more on the extroverted side, as you can smell what's in there before you actually get your nose into the glass. And there really is a whole bunch of stuff going on. There's sort of sweeter honeysuckle. There is a hint of almost vanilla pod. And then behind that, sweeter nectarine fruit and maybe some apricots going on, and also kind of a saline sea spray element. Perhaps what's most impressive about the nose is that it manages to be extroverted, as I said, but at the same time feeling quite delicate. And I think it's that kind of honeysuckle floral element that perhaps gives it that impression. So let's see what it's like on the palate. And really, there's that same dynamic going on the palate, because you hit up front by very fresh apricot acidity, which at first impressions may seem a little lean, but then your mouth becomes awash with the crazy saline influences, and there's a slight hint of that chalk dust coming in as well. And then just as you're getting used to the tart apricot and the saline interference, which presents as quite dynamic, you then have a kind of return of sweeter nectarine fruit, which gives it a generosity on the palate that perhaps you may have felt was missing at the beginning. So really, as you keep introducing characters, I mean, by the end of the wine show, by the time everyone's turned off the lights and the ushers are picking up flattened boxes of popcorn, you still got this peach and apricot waiting to perform an encore. And in fact, this kind of triggers a whole repeat of the process. You just want to go back and have another sip. So you can see how those elements all plow into each other and end up with something quite remarkable. And then you heard me mentioning texture earlier, because right towards the end, it takes on an almost citrus element, which has a kind of pithy texture to it, which is really interesting. It sort of dries it out towards the end. But then, as I said, the apricot and fruit comes back and that juicy element is returned. It really is a beautiful circle of life. Okay, so that's all we have time for today. But if you have any questions about Alex McFarlane or McFarlane Wines, or even Chenin Blanc and the Poker Dry, feel free to drop them in the section below. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then why not subscribe to the HanDrinksSolo wine channel so that you can stay up to date with the weekly wine videos that I publish, where I touch on common cultivars, niche cultivars, South African classics, as well as some of the emerging rising stars amongst South Africa's more dynamic winemakers.